Little Nightmares has always had a more playful outlook on its genre, identifying itself as charming or cat and mouse style rather than all-out horror. The nowhere is uncanny, warped and distorted reflections of reality. Its influence enforced by its corrupted denizens in order to feed whatever malevolent eldritch terror lurks beyond our perception. But are they all truly evil? Or are they forced, against their will, to mindlessly and mercilessly leech every ounce of humanity that's ferried into their world? So I'll ask you, little ones, to open your minds as we explore the possibility that everything is not as it seems. This is the SuperWeapon theory. But first, the obligatory spoiler warning. This video will of course contain spoilers for Little Nightmares, Little Nightmares 2, Very Little Nightmares, and the Sounds of Nightmares audio series. And of course a colossal shout out to legendary Little Nightmares content creator It's Just Jord, the man who inspired me to create this kind of content and my go-to Little Nightmares source. I'm going to be leaving a link in the description below. As always, feel free to check that out. Pop over to his channel, like, subscribe, and then come back because you're not going to want to miss what I have to say. Now with that being said, let's consider what we think we already know about the nowhere and the twisted monstrosities that lurk within it. So far, every single adult that we've encountered throughout every Little Nightmares game has wished to do us harm. As of some of the younger enemies, but I'll get to them later. As far as we've been made aware, the adults in the nowhere have wanted to eat us, enslave us, or subject us to sadistic torture methods of some description. But why? Why does every single one of these individuals seem to be entirely devoid of humanity when it comes to children? Well, it is plausible for us to speculate that the adults we encounter within the nowhere are being controlled, either psychologically or magically manipulated by the higher beings otherwise known as the Spectrals. And there have been several theories surrounding this, ranging from a curse that causes insatiable hunger, to the static hypnotism of the signal tower being channeled through the televisions. It could even be implied that the Spectrals are using the televisions to monitor the actions of the inhabitants, which could influence their behaviour. The mere thought that their terrible tyrant is always watching could be enough to convince them to commit atrocities in its name, rather than suffer the consequences of going against their nature and defying their seemingly omnipotent overlord. This could explain why the enemies our pint-sized protags contend with all seem to act as if of one mind, only abandoning their posts when they're distracted from their vice by our miniature heroes, with hypnosis being implied significantly in both the games and the podcast series The Sounds of Nightmares. The only other possibility is that the adults who find themselves within the nowhere are inherently evil, sadistic by default, and accepted into the world of nightmares so that they can live out their disturbing and depraved fantasies and suffer no consequences for it. Unless there exists a likelihood that not all of the adults are bad. But hold on, I can already feel the nice janitor theory comments flooding in. And while we're all entitled to our opinions on Roger the Dapper and his questionable quirks, what I'm about to say does not concern him. Let me explain. The first piece of evidence I have to support the fact that at least some of the lost souls trapped within this purgatory have at least attempted to preserve their humanity is the seemingly conscious effort to remove or destroy all of the televisions in the Pale City. Notice that we find them in the garbage, tossed haphazardly into the street, thrown from windows, and disposed of in the most remote locations. This shows that the residents of the Pale City, at least once upon a time, had the wherewithal to recognise that they were being manipulated by the signal tower and actively chose to fight against it. But if that's the case, then what happened to all the good people that fought against the all-seeing eyes? If there are so many good people left in the nowhere, where are they? Well, I suppose an easy answer would be that they're just rejected from the nowhere entirely. Imagine some kind of rapture-like event where all the righteous souls were pulled from their nightmarish limbo and into the afterlife. But that answer feels a little stale to me, and I didn't feel comfortable ending my theory on a factless presumption. And evidence of absence does not constitute concrete proof. But you know what does? Concrete proof. I believe it's reasonable to speculate that we are witnessing the end of a war, a community divided by morals and the desire to preserve their humanity. Let me substantiate that hypothesis by sharing some of my own interpretations from what we've observed in the Little Nightmares 3 gameplay demo. First thing I noticed while contemplating this theory was the desert surrounding the Necropolis is littered with suitcases, indicating a number of people either fleeing to or from the Dead Sea. The next thing I noticed is that these people don't seem to use anything even remotely electronic, favouring a more simple lifestyle, utilising the power of the desert's ceaseless winds to power their mills and relying on kinetic energy coupled with complex pulley systems to operate their heavy machinery. They even seem to have resorted to sustaining themselves on the only other abundant food source in the area. Given that crows can be seen hanging on hooks within the dwellers' homes, ready to be plucked of their feathers before consumption, there even seems to be some evidence that these dwellers value younger life, given that there is a baby's crib visible inside one of the dilapidated homes. It would appear that these simple, humble and peaceful people chose to isolate themselves from their all-seeing oppressor by returning to a metropolis that perhaps once served as the epicenter of their society. Where it seems, at one point in history, the all-seeing eye was once worshipped and obeyed as it is everywhere else. It is plausible that the spectrals, or whatever nightmarish entity controls this world, recognise that its modern methods are ineffective against a society which actively seeks to shun their shortcomings and embrace a life that allows them to focus on the more positive values of society. So it responded like any vengeful tyrant would, by subjecting its enemies to its wrath in the form of a superweapon, the monster baby, an unhesitant, emotionless behemoth with only one singular objective, resulting in an Attack on Titan meets Pompeii level cataclysm that reduced the peaceful population to a museum of ashen statues. Some tried to run. Some tried to appease the beast with human sacrifice. And a few, it seems, used their resources to make dark feathered umbrellas, which could be used to block out the hot desert sun and potentially shield themselves from the monster baby's gorgonic gaze. And if that's the case, then we may just meet some of the survivors in 2024. But that's going to do it for this theory, guys. Of course, I would love to know what you think in the comments below, and of course please do drop your own speculations because I do read all of them, and I like addressing my favourites in future videos, like this. And so says, peace be with you, and also with you. Have you ever noticed that all the kids in the Little Nightmares world have some sort of problem, whether physical and or mental? Noon, I believe she's 6, has a tumour. Mono, there's a bag over his head which could indicate something. Also his name could be a nickname he gave himself, like Noon. The girl with the pigtails from the comics, Bleeding Nose, and a character from the comics issue 3, doesn't like mirrors and was bullied. They all willingly chose to go to the nowhere because real life isn't treating them too well. Yes, now this is something that I considered a little while ago because we know that at the end of the Sounds of Nightmares, Noon does actively seek to go with the ferryman, like she chooses to, he gives her the option almost, and when she's forced to choose between remaining with Otto in the counties and listening to him when he's calling out for her, or going with the ferryman, she chooses the ferryman. As does the character in the comics. It's also speculated that Mono's name has a lot of implications behind it and substantiates the fact that he has monophobia, or the fear of being alone. It's absolutely a possibility, and I think quite a distinct one, that the children who were chosen to go to the nowhere are done so because the ferryman thinks he's saving them. It seems that the children that choose to go to the nowhere have been dealt a bad hand. They're all emotionally or physically damaged in one way or another, and they're took to the nowhere as a means to save them. You'll notice that Noon talks about feeling like she had the same energy levels that she had prior to the water sickness when she's in the nowhere. So yeah, I definitely think that your comment has value there, and your theory definitely has merit, so thank you so much for that, appreciate it. L says, about the potential connection between Dr. Ingen and Dr. No, I think that it's worth pointing out that in Swedish, and I say Swedish because Tazi is a Swedish company, the word Ingen translates to no. Just putting it out there. Now that's a really astute observation, and I've included this comment amongst my favourites because it actually corrected me on something I said during a live stream. I said, I think, that Tazia were a French studio. And they're not, they're Swedish. I think that a large part of the development team were French, or at least have some connection in France, from what I can gather. But that translation from Swedish is absolutely correct, and you are right that Tazia is a Swedish studio. So my apologies for my mistake in the previous video, and thank you so much for your comment, I really appreciate it. And the fact that Dr. Injun pretty much translates directly to Dr. No further solidifies my theory on Dr. No being an enemy in the later game. Kind of. But I suppose we'll see with that. Thank you for your comment. And finally we have Reb the Shotgun Warrior. They said, I don't know how you skipped over this, and I saw Noon in the comments mention it, but if this theory is true, then the fact that Roger's name tag has an eye on it means something, considering the name tag was made in the counties and not in the nowhere. And you guys are absolutely right. They're referring to my latest video, The Dialect Theory, that speculated that the reason we don't see any legible dialogue in the Little Nightmares universe is because it takes place in a dream world and therefore we can't read it, and the only reason we can read Roger's name tag is because it must have originated in the counties and not in the nowhere. But what these guys have very accurately pointed out is that Roger's name tag has an eye on it. The eye symbol is intrinsically linked with the nowhere, and therefore that can only really mean that the name tag at least originated in the nowhere, which kind of debunks my theory halfway, or at least throws a couple of things into question and adds a level of curiosity, and that's really well noticed. So what do you guys think of this theory? Do you believe that Roger got the name tag after coming to the nowhere, or do you think he got it before? And what are your reasons for thinking this? I'd really like to know, because obviously what we're doing here is entirely speculation. We're theorising and we're having fun, and the truth is nobody apart from Tazia Studios have any solid concrete answers, and even they don't have everything. I have it on good authority that the people who work for Tazia and Bandai and now Supermassive have NDAs signed, and also that they're all allowed to think their own theories up. They all have their own headcanon, but I don't think any of them are told strictly exactly what's going on. But I think I've rambled on for long enough, so that's going to do it for this episode, guys. Don't forget to smash like and subscribe if you like seeing content like this from me, and of course ring the bell so you can be notified when another one comes out. And please leave your own observations, speculations, theories and so on in the comments section below, and I'll give them a read, and who knows, I might even be reading yours next time. But until then, that's game over.